Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah, and today we are talking about how I fertilize my plants through the wintertime. So if you're wondering how to feed your plants throughout the wintertime, keep on watching. Don't forget, before we get started, take a moment, hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and ring that bell to be notified of any new videos that I post. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's video. So I've gotten a lot of questions through my various social media on how I feed particularly my hoyas throughout the wintertime, but in general, fertilizing plants through the winter. Should you do it? Should you do it less often? Those kinds of things. And so I thought I'd share with you a little bit of what I do to take care of my plants through these winter months. So in order to understand my feeding schedule through the winter, I thought I'd share briefly just my feeding through the growing season. I'm a subscriber to the idea of feeding weekly. Now, I don't actually fertilize my plants once a week, but I use a very, very weak concoction, maybe every other week, maybe sometimes every 3 weeks, so that I'm feeding them on a consistent basis, but not a very strong mixture. The products that I use to feed my plants is I have this indoor plant food. I am not particularly attached to the Miracle-Gro, but that's usually what happens to be around when I grab stuff. It works just fine. It's just not something like, don't go out and buy it because I'm using it. I don't prefer it over any other brand. Maybe this growing season I'll experiment with some other brands. This is just what I happen to grab. I like the pump top. It allows me to give it just 1 or 2 little pumps into my watering can. What I am a huge fan of, though, is the Super Thrive. So I use a couple of drops of this, both in my plants that are in a traditional soil, as well as I mix in a couple drops with my semi-hydroponics as well. And this stuff I find works really, really well, helps promote lots of new growth, and my plants look healthier and happier when I use it. So I use a combination of a couple of drops of each of these in my watering can to feed my plants. So during the winter months, most plants slow down. Some plants even go a little bit dormant, so they don't need as much food as they might during the summer months. So for here, that's usually like November, December, January, maybe even a little bit into February. But I do find there are lots of plants, just the amount of light that they're getting in here or the conditions that they're in, they actually are still putting out new growth. So what I do in order to determine if a plant needs to be fed or not throughout the winter months is I'm looking for those signs of new growth. And that might not be just one new leaf. I'm looking for like a significant amount of new growth, that they're popping out a couple of leaves here and there. A great example of that would be my Monstera adansonii, which is always putting out new leaves. My red maranta, my prayer plant, that one is almost constantly putting out new leaves. So those are examples of plants that I would keep an eye on and probably want to feed somewhat often throughout the winter months. So to feed these plants that are displaying signs of new growth, I'm going to take that concoction that I normally take, the indoor fertilizer as well as the Super Thrive, and I'm going to water it down even more. So if I'm using maybe a couple pumps during the summertime and a couple drops of that Super Thrive, I'm going to take that and I'm going to water it down again by half, just so that I'm not running the risk of burning my plant or over fertilizing it through these winter months. My process for fertilizing my plant, whether it's growing season or not, is I run some water through the plant to begin with so the soil is already nice and moist, and then I pour a little bit of that fertilizer on the top so that it can disseminate throughout the soil and reach the roots somewhat more evenly, and I'm not, again, running the risk of burning any particular part of the roots with the stronger amount of fertilizer. The other situation in which I might feed a plant in the wintertime is a little bit trickier and a little bit more up to your own opinion. I have had a couple plants that maybe look like they're not doing so well in the wintertime. Maybe some of the leaves are turning yellow, things like that. And I know it's not from another reason. Usually those would be plants that have been in the same pot for a while, or they're starting to outgrow their pot a little bit. My Alocasia Ivory Coast is an example of this, and my Monstera behind me, both plants that are probably pretty close to needing to be repotted. And so there's a stronger possibility that some of these things that I'm seeing in them are more of a symptom of malnutrition or a nutrient lack rather than over or underwatering, things like that. If you want to know more about looking for those signs of the malnutrition or the nutrient deficiency in your plants, I can certainly do a dedicated video on that. It's just something to keep in mind, but I really wouldn't say just because your plant is suffering that you should go ahead and feed it. Really, I'm looking at those specific things that it's starting to outgrow its pot. It's maybe still continuing to put on new growth throughout the wintertime. And those are the signs that I'm starting to look for, that maybe it's a lack of nutrition rather than anything else. I know I'm not underwatering it. It's getting enough light. Again, it's struggling in conditions that it was doing just fine in before. And it just seems like it needs a little bit of an extra boost. And as far as the frequency of feeding goes in the wintertime, it's really not often at all. So like I said, I'm feeding my plants probably every couple of weeks throughout the growing season, depending on my schedule, how the plants are looking, those kinds of things. Throughout the wintertime, it's probably once a month or every 6 weeks, even for those plants that are continuing to put on a lot of new growth. Again, I would rather run the risk of not giving it quite enough food rather than trying to feed it and ending up damaging the plant or burning some of the roots or the leaves. So it's really up to you and your own personal opinion whether you want to go ahead and feed your plants throughout the winter months. It also kind of depends on your region. Again, some regions are going to get more sunshine, more warmth, and they're probably going to continue to grow more throughout these shorter days. And some of you might be a little bit more in the north, and then you're getting those really short days and it's colder weather and your plants are really going to become dormant and not put on a lot of new growth. And in that case, you're probably not going to want to feed them in the winter months like somebody who's in some of the south and the more sunny conditions might want to. So to recap, feeding your plants throughout the wintertime, look for those signs of new growth. And again, not just 1 or 2 new leaves, but a significant amount of growth, that they're continuing to put out new leaves. That's a sign that they are probably going to be needing a little bit more of those nutrients. And again, signs of nutrient deficiency, again, that's really up to your own personal opinion and knowing your plants. But it can happen a little bit in the wintertime, especially some of us are waiting till spring to go ahead and repot those plants, and they're in a little bit too small of a pot right now. That might be a situation in which you want to go ahead and feed those plants also during the wintertime. So I hope you guys found today's video helpful. If you did, go ahead and like this video. Leave me a comment down below if you have any questions or if you want a little bit more information about anything that I've talked about today. And go ahead and leave me any requests for videos that you would like to see down in the comments as well. I know a few of you have been requesting some updated plant tours of my house, and I certainly have a few of those planned over the next couple of months, so look for those coming soon. I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye.